In a small, desolate town stood an abandoned school, its once vibrant walls now faded and cracked. Legends whispered of the dark past it held a place where children had mysteriously vanished, leaving behind only echoes of their laughter and cries. One stormy evening, a group of curious teenagers, drawn by tales of the supernatural, decided to investigate the school. Armed with flashlights and bravado, they stepped through the rusted gates, their hearts pounding in rhythm with the thunder. The air was thick with an unsettling chill as they entered the decaying building, each creak of the floorboards amplifying their unease. The walls seemed to breathe, pulsing with the weight of forgotten memories. As they wandered through the hallways, they found remnants of the past dusty desks, tattered textbooks, and a playground outside, eerily still under the looming clouds. In the heart of the school, they discovered a classroom untouched by time, where an ancient blackboard bore cryptic messages scrawled in a child's handwriting. "Help us," one phrase read, sending chills down their spines. Just as they began to piece together the chilling history, a cold draft swept through the room, extinguishing their flashlights. Panic set in, and the teenagers fumbled in darkness, their breaths coming quick and shallow. Suddenly, the sound of childish giggles echoed down the corridor, and they froze, the laughter rising and falling like a sinister lullaby. Summoning their courage, they followed the sound, their footsteps hesitant as they entered a long-abandoned gymnasium. The walls were adorned with faded posters of past achievements, yet the atmosphere was heavy with sorrow. In the center of the gym, they spotted a group of spectral children, their translucent forms playing an eternal game of tag, unaware of the living intruders. The teens exchanged terrified glances, realizing too late that they were not alone. One boy stepped forward, driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, and called out to them. Instantly, the laughter ceased, and the children turned, their eyes hollow and pleading. They beckoned the teens closer, their hands outstretched, as if inviting them to join the game. It became clear that these lost souls were trapped, forever bound to the school, their innocence stolen by an unseen malevolence. The atmosphere shifted abruptly as the door slammed shut behind them, locking the group inside. Panic surged and they rushed to escape, but the windows had inexplicably vanished, replaced by an endless void. The children's laughter morphed into cries of desperation, and the teens felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over them. Each attempt to flee was met with a chilling resistance, as if the very building itself conspired against them. Shadows flickered at the corners of their vision, whispering secrets of the school's tragic history, stories of betrayal, sacrifice, and a dark ritual gone awry. As time warped around them, they discovered that the school was not just a structure but a living entity, feeding on fear and despair. One by one, the group succumbed to its grasp, drawn into the past, where they witnessed the horrific events that led to the children's plight. They saw the cruel teachers who had punished the innocent, the rituals that bound their souls, and the desperate attempts to escape that ended in tragedy. With each revelation, the teens felt their own identities slipping away, replaced by the memories of those who had suffered before them. In a final act of desperation, they banded together, trying to remember who they were, clinging to the hope of escape. Their shared determination ignited a flicker of light in the darkness, causing the walls to tremble. The spirits, sensing their resolve, began to fight back against the darkness that bound them. Together, the teens and the lost children formed a bond, channeling their combined strength against the malevolent force that had ensnared them. As the school roared with anger, a blinding light erupted from their unity, illuminating the shadows that had held them captive. The walls cracked and splintered, revealing glimpses of the outside world, a world they had almost forgotten. With a final, earth-shattering scream, the building began to collapse, and the trapped souls surged toward the light, breaking the chains that bound them. The teens, propelled by a force beyond their understanding, raced toward the emerging dawn, heartbeats synchronized in their desperate bid for freedom. They burst through the crumbling doors, just as the first rays of sunlight pierced the stormy sky, leaving the horrors of the school behind. As they turned back to witness the destruction, the echoes of laughter faded into silence, replaced by the serene whispers of the wind. Though they had escaped, the experience had changed them irrevocably, leaving scars that would never fully heal. The town remained oblivious, the school now a smouldering ruin, but in the hearts of those who had ventured inside, the memories of the trapped children would linger, haunting reminders of a horror that could never be truly forgotten. As the sun broke through the clouds, the teenagers stumbled away from the ruins of the school, disoriented and shaken. They were alive, but the weight of what they had witnessed clung to them like a dark shroud. They tried to rationalize the events, laughing nervously, but the laughter felt hollow. Each glance exchanged between them spoke volumes. Questions lingered unasked, fears unsaid. In the weeks that followed, the once tight-knit group began to drift apart, haunted by the knowledge that they had brushed against something profoundly sinister. One evening, Mia, the most sensitive of the group, was unable to shake the feeling that the school's malevolence still lingered. She started having vivid nightmares of the children, their hollow eyes and outstretched hands, begging for release. Each dream felt real, the cries echoing in her mind long after she awoke. Determined to find closure, she reached out to the others, suggesting they return to the site of their trauma. Reluctantly, they agreed, each still wrestling with their own unresolved emotions. When they arrived at the school's ruins, the air was thick with tension. What remained of the building was eerily silent, the debris still smouldering. They stood at the threshold, memories flooding back, flashbacks of laughter and fear entwined. As they entered the charred remains, a gust of wind swept through, carrying with it faint whispers that chilled them to the bone. The ground seemed to pulse beneath their feet, as if the very earth was alive with sorrow. They made their way back to the gymnasium, where they had first encountered the spectral children. Here the air felt charged, and shadows danced along the walls. Mia knelt among the ashes, feeling an inexplicable pull toward the center of the room. "They need us," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. The others, caught in a web of fear and empathy, encircled her, their hands linking together as if to anchor themselves against the darkness. As they formed a circle, the shadows thickened around them, coalescing into a swirling mass. Suddenly, the faint outlines of the children appeared once more, their faces a mixture of hope and despair. The teenagers felt their hearts racing, the air thickening with tension. "We're here to help you," Mia cried out, her voice steady despite her fear. The children's eyes flickered with recognition, and they began to gather closer, forming a spectral circle of their own. In that moment, the room erupted with a cacophony of sounds, echoes of laughter intertwined with cries for help. The teenagers felt a rush of energy surge through them, connecting their souls to the lost children. Memories flooded their minds, unveiling the tragic tales of each spirit, the ones who had been betrayed, the ones who had never returned home, and the ones who had watched their friends disappear into the darkness. Emboldened, they began to chant, their voices rising in unison as they recited the words inscribed on the ancient blackboard. "Help us. Set us free." With each repetition, the air around them shimmered, and the temperature plummeted. The shadows writhed, a furious storm brewing within the confines of the gym. Just as despair threatened to take hold, a blinding light burst forth from their hands, illuminating the space in a radiant glow. The children's faces shifted, their hollow eyes filling with warmth and gratitude. They reached out, and as the light enveloped them, the darkness around the teenagers began to dissolve. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a gentle breeze that swept through the gym, carrying with it the whispers of forgotten dreams. One by one, the children vanished into the light, their laughter echoing like a fading melody. As the last child disappeared, a serene silence fell over the room. The teenagers, breathless and trembling, stood in awe of what they had just witnessed. They had become conduits of hope, liberating the spirits trapped by the horrors of the past. But the relief was bittersweet. They understood that their lives had been irrevocably altered. They were now part of a story that transcended time, a link between the living and the loving, and the lost. In the days that followed, they found solace in their shared experience, forming a bond that no darkness could sever. They created a memorial for the lost children, a place where their laughter could resonate once more, honoring their memory with kindness and compassion. As they moved forward, they carried the spirits within them, a reminder of the fragility of life and the power of connection. Yet on quiet nights, when the wind howled through the town, Mia would sometimes hear faint whispers carried on the breeze, echoing the laughter of children, reminders that some doors, once opened, can never truly close. In the months that followed, the town began to change. Mia and her friends felt a creeping unease settle over their once familiar streets. Strange occurrences became commonplace: lights flickering at odd hours, whispers just beyond the reach of hearing, and shadows that seemed to dart just out of sight. The memorial they had erected for the lost children became a focal point of the town, drawing both mourners and the curious, but even it seemed to exude a sense of sorrow that wrapped around the area like a heavy fog. One particularly stormy night, as the wind howled and rain lashed against the windows, Mia woke from another nightmare, this time more vivid, more insistent. She sat up, drenched in sweat, the echoes of the children's cries still ringing in her ears. Desperate for clarity, she reached out to the others. They gathered in her living room, tension crackling in the air. "We have to do something," Mia insisted, her eyes wide with urgency. "They're still trying to reach us." Reluctantly, the group agreed to hold a séance, hoping to find answers or perhaps a way to finally set the children free once and for all. They gathered supplies: candles, a makeshift Ouija board drawn hastily on cardboard, and the trinkets they'd taken from the school, items they believed might help bridge the gap between their world and the next. That evening, as they lit the candles and dimmed the lights, a thick, oppressive atmosphere enveloped them, heightening their sense of dread. With trembling hands, they placed their fingers on the planchette, their hearts racing. Mia closed her eyes, focusing on the connection she felt with the lost spirits. "If you're here, show us a sign," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. For a moment, there was silence. Then the planchette began to move, dragging across the board. The teenagers gasped, their eyes wide as it spelled out help. The atmosphere grew colder, and a low rumble echoed through the room, as if the very walls were groaning in response. Shadows flickered, and the candles sputtered. "What do you want us to do?" Mia asked, her voice trembling. The planchette continued to move, spelling out "find us." Panic surged through the group, but Mia felt an undeniable pull. She was meant to help them. "We need to go back to the ruins," she urged, and despite their hesitation, her determination spurred them into action. As they approached the remains of the school, the wind howled like a living thing, clawing at their skin. The ground seemed to vibrate beneath their feet, pulsing with a strange energy that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. They entered the crumbling structure, the air thick with the scent of decay. As they made their way to the gymnasium, whispers floated around them, echoing off the walls, their tone pleading. In the center of the gym, they formed a circle once more, hands linked together. "We're here," Mia called out, her voice firm. "We're ready to help." The air grew heavier, and shadows began to swirl around them, coalescing into the faint outlines of the children. This time their faces were clearer, their expressions filled with desperation. The teenagers felt the weight of their sorrow pressing down on them, a tide of grief that threatened to drown them. In a moment of clarity, Mia remembered the ancient blackboard. "We need to recreate the chant," she exclaimed, and the others nodded, urgency igniting their resolve. They began to chant, voices rising together in a powerful surge of emotion. "Help us. Set us free." The shadows twisted violently, as if in response to their call. The temperature dropped sharply, and the candles flickered dangerously. With each repetition, they felt their connection to the spirits deepening, and the cries of the children grew louder, echoing through the gym. Suddenly the ground shook, and the walls of the gymnasium began to crack. Dust fell from the ceiling, and a chilling wind swept through, forcing them to clutch tighter to one another. "Keep going," Mia urged, her heart pounding. "We can do this." As they chanted, a blinding light erupted from the center of their circle, illuminating the shadows that loomed around them. The faces of the children filled with hope, their hollow eyes now shining with light. "Thank you," they whispered in unison, and as the brightness grew, the shadows shrank back, howling in agony. One by one, the children reached out, their fingers brushing against Mia and her friends, filling them with warmth and peace. The light enveloped them, and in a flash, the oppressive weight that had settled over the town began to lift. As the last vestiges of darkness dissolved, the gymnasium erupted in a wave of sound laughter mingled with joyous cries. The shadows dissipated, leaving only a gentle breeze and a lingering sense of serenity. The teenagers stood, awestruck, tears streaming down their faces as they realized the spirits were finally free. But as they turned to leave, an unsettling silence enveloped them, and a final, bone-chilling whisper floated through the air. Not all free, a sense of dread washed over them as they realized the implication. Not all the children had escaped, some remained bound to the school, their sorrow lingering like a heavy fog. The teens stumbled out into the night, the weight of their victory overshadowed by the knowledge that the darkness was not entirely vanquished. In the following weeks, the group struggled to adjust to the knowledge that their journey was far from over. They felt the lingering presence of the lost children, the shadows of those still trapped haunting their dreams and daily lives. The town, too, seemed to be affected. Strange occurrences escalated, pets went missing, the townsfolk spoke of feeling watched, and shadows flickered just out of sight. Mia and her friends resolved to investigate further, determined to uncover the truth behind the school's dark legacy. They delved into the town's history, piecing together the puzzle of the children who had vanished. They uncovered tales of an old principal rumored to have dabbled in the occult, whispers of rituals that had taken place within the very walls of the school. Each discovery deepened their connection to the lost children, and with each revelation came the growing sense of urgency. Mia proposed a final plan, a ritual to confront the remnants of the malevolence that lingered, to ensure that every child could find peace. Gathering supplies once more, they prepared for their greatest challenge yet, knowing that they might confront not just the spirits of the lost children, but also the darkness that had bound them. On the night of the ritual, they returned to the ruins, their resolve steeled against the rising tide of fear. As they entered the gymnasium, they felt the air crackle with energy, the shadows swirling ominously. "We need to be united," Mia urged, and they linked hands tightly, focusing on their purpose. With the remnants of the past echoing around them, they began to chant once more, calling out to the spirits, asking for their presence. The ground trembled beneath them, and a chilling wind whipped through the space. Shadows began to take form, twisted and angry, and the air thickened with sorrow and rage. "Show yourselves," Mia shouted, her voice rising above the cacophony. "We're here to help you find peace." The shadows roared in defiance, swirling around them like a tempest, but the teenagers held their ground, hearts pounding with determination. As they continued to chant, a blinding light erupted from their circle, illuminating the dark corners of the gym. The anguished cries of the spirits began to echo, and amidst the chaos, they felt a sudden calm, a collective sigh of relief. The children's faces emerged from the shadows, their expressions filled with hope, but still tinged with sorrow. "Set us free," they whispered, their voices like a breeze rustling through leaves. Fueled by their desperation, the teenagers poured their energy into the light, willing it to grow brighter, to encompass all that was trapped within the walls of the school. The shadows began to wail, twisting and screaming as they were drawn toward the light. In that moment of unity, the air vibrated with power, and the light surged forward, consuming the darkness. The shadows shrieked, a sound that pierced the night, but the teenagers remained steadfast, their voices rising higher, stronger. With one final push, they shouted, "You are free!" The light exploded, filling the gymnasium with brilliance, and as the shadows dissipated, the cries transformed into laughter, joyful, liberated laughter. When the light finally faded, the gym was silent. The teenagers stood panting, their bodies trembling, hearts racing. They looked around in disbelief. The oppressive atmosphere was gone. The children were free, their spirits released from the chains of the past. As they emerged from the ruins, a sense of peace washed over them, replacing the darkness that had plagued their lives. The town felt different, the air lighter, the shadows retreating. They had faced the horror together, and in doing so, had reclaimed not only the lost children, but also a part of themselves. In the weeks that followed, life slowly returned to normal. The lingering whispers of the lost children faded, and the town began to heal. Mia and her friends found solace in their shared experience, forever bonded by the horrors they had faced and the courage they had discovered within themselves. They often visited the memorial, sharing stories and memories, laughing together under the light of the stars. Yet, in the quiet moments, when the wind rustled the leaves or the night felt particularly still, Mia often found herself at the memorial. One evening, as dusk settled over the town and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, she stood alone, lost in thought. The weight of the past lingered in the air, a gentle reminder of everything they had endured. As she traced her fingers over the names etched into the stone, a soft breeze swept through the clearing, carrying with it a familiar warmth. She closed her eyes, and for a fleeting moment, she could hear the distant laughter of children, joyous and free. A smile tugged at her lips, but the joy was bittersweet, tinged with the memory of their struggle. Suddenly, she felt a presence beside her. Turning, she saw her friends approaching, their faces illuminated by the fading light. They joined her at the memorial, a circle of solidarity forged by shared trauma and triumph. "Do you feel that?" Noah asked, his voice low and reverent. "It's like they're still here with us." Mia nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of sorrow and gratitude. "We helped them find peace," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But they'll always be a part of us." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in hues of purple and gold, a soft glow enveloped the memorial. They stood in silence, each lost in their thoughts, the atmosphere thick with unspoken emotions. Then, as if responding to their presence, a sudden breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the faint sound of laughter once more. In that moment, Mia realized the truth: the children were free, but their stories would forever echo in the hearts of those who remembered. They had not only released the spirits but had also learned the importance of connection, of holding on to hope amidst darkness. "Let's promise to keep their memory alive," Mia urged, her voice steady. "We'll share their stories, make sure they're never forgotten." The others nodded, their expressions solemn yet resolute. They linked hands, forming a chain of support, their hearts united in purpose. As they stood together, the wind picked up, swirling around them, lifting their spirits, filling the air with an ethereal sense of peace. And then, as if a curtain had been drawn back, they saw them, faint silhouettes of the children, dancing among the trees, bathed in soft light. They laughed, their faces radiant with joy, unburdened by the darkness that had once held them captive. Mia felt tears prick her eyes, not of sadness, but of overwhelming relief and happiness. She squeezed her friend's hands, and together they watched as the spirits twirled and played, their laughter ringing out like a beautiful melody. The shadows that had haunted the town began to fade, replaced by a gentle glow that illuminated the night. As the last traces of the children shimmered into the ether, Mia and her friends stood rooted in place, a powerful sense of closure washing over them. They had faced the darkness, and in doing so had forged a bond that would endure beyond this moment. With the first stars twinkling overhead, they turned away from the memorial, hearts lighter than they had been in months. As they walked back into the embrace of the night, a new chapter awaited them, one filled with hope, resilience, and the promise to honor those who had touched their lives in ways they would never forget. And in the distance, the laughter of children echoed softly, a reminder that even in the darkest times, light could always break through.